Well, without going into too many details, ultimately, this whole thing ended up crumbling and you got sentenced to 5 years in prison.
That's correct. I was facing 32 years in prison because, again, of the money table, just like it works just like a drug guideline. And ultimately, I took a plea for 5 years.
Right. You took a 5-year plea, and there were 48 different lawsuits filed in 31 cities. And the judge ordered you to actually pay back $65 million in civil judgments. And there was also there's an $18 million payback and so forth. There's a lot that goes on with this case.
See, what you're reading, again, this is the reason why for my podcast, frankgioiajr.com. The reason why is because of the salacious reporting that was done by the Arizona Republic. And the only reason why it was done because they found out about my past and they could sell newspapers. So because of salacious reportings, and I know you've been involved with lawsuits, Vlad. You know how it works. If you're not being sued, you're not doing business.
That's true.
Okay? So, again, I'll get into the details later on. But I took 5 years because I already had, it was similar to time served. So, take the 5 or risk getting 30.
I mean, what was it like to do 7 years? And how long were you out before you had to go back in again?
20 years.
Okay. So you spent 20 years out. You're used to, living a free life. You have a new identity. You don't have any beef from your previous life. And now suddenly you're back in prison for almost the same amount of time that you had to serve before.
Right.
So how did you get a head around that? Being back in prison again?
Yeah, it's like a nightmare. It's like a bad dream. But, you deal with it, and I had no choice but to deal with it. I fought it. Like I said, got it down to a reasonable number that I could live with. And again, I'll talk about it more on the podcast and later on in the future because I'm still on supervised release. I don't want them to violate me, okay? But, no, the jails, the environment changed as well. That's what was more, the jails back then were totally different than the jails today. The whole landscape changed. Doing time nowadays versus back then.
In what way?
Well, today there's a lot of different, the clientele changed a lot. Back then it was, today there's a bunch of sex offenders. There's different crimes that people are committing with the internet. And there's so much of it, they don't know where to put these people. And before you turn around, there's a lot of sex offenders. There's a lot of people. Almost everybody cooperated. There's dropouts. There's a thing called the dropout yards where you drop out from your gang, and now you're on a yard. So like years ago, we never had that. We never had a yard where there's sex offenders. We never had a yard where there's a dropout yard. Stuff like that.
I mean, when you go back to prison, are you put into a witness protection area as well, or are you in general population?
No, they offered me to go back into the witness protection program with SEC. I chose not to. I went to population.
Okay, so now you're in general population. And what prison were you in during that time?
Out here in Arizona, I was in Florence, which is a county federal holdover. And when I was sentenced, I went to La Tuna, Texas.